Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I've done my research about how private equity firms can utilize generative artificial intelligence to enhance deal sourcing, decision making, and value creation. So I've had a number of conversations with industry professionals about this, and I want to spend this presentation just looking at the key takeaways from my research. But if anyone wants any more background information, you can read my longer memo on it. But in terms of the areas where I think generative AI can be most impactful in the private equity industry, it's firstly in deal assessment and investment decisions, a huge potential there. In terms of the valuation models, due diligence is another really big area. So those three are internally within the private equity funds, and then also externally within portfolio companies' existing investments. And thirdly, I've also looked a bit at different models and costs. So moving first to deal assessment and investment decisions. So generative AI has a huge potential to be impactful in terms of summarizing the SIMs for potential investments into investment committee memos in the context of the extensive proprietary data sets that private equity firms possess. So, for example, the hundreds of thousands of SIMs that they've already seen and have on their files, as well as which of these SIMs led to an acquisition ultimately, and if it led to an acquisition, and whether that acquisition ultimately was successful or not. And then the firms have a huge amount of data related to all these investments, so both the successful and the unsuccessful investments, so both financial and operational characteristics. So actually, when looking at a new potential investment, comparing the characteristics that you see on that versus this data set can be like incredibly informative and yeah, just impactful. So on the key takeaways here, mainstream AI expected to handle mixed modalities, so text, charts, pictures, effectively in the next 18 months or so. So they're not currently quite at a point where they can do this effectively, but it's yeah, in the medium term. And the capability to evaluate what will be a good or a bad deal is still very much, human judgment. So human judgment will continue to be incredibly important, but the interim steps will become a lot more effective. So this will enable smoother and faster execution, and also the ability for firms to spend a lot more time on the human elements. So talking to management teams and just building those relationships to get to hopefully build up put them in a position where they're able to be the preferred acquirer of a company. Second is in the valuation models. So AI has the potential to automate and augment about 80% of the valuation model work stream. And that would allow the experts, the junior private equity professionals, to spend time on the edge cases. And the AI model can highlight certain parts of the model where these experts should spend more time. So, for example, if a company has undertaken an acquisition in the past 2 years and some of the revenue and operating streams look a bit off, then the model can highlight those and the professional will just spend time looking at that. There's also a lot of judgment that will still need to be incorporated, such as growth drivers, etc. On the takeaway, this is even further out, so it's probably 2 to 3 years before models are able to deliver on this value proposition. The reason for that is that there are certain challenges, such as processing value, that we're quite far off. And accuracy is another huge implication here. So if models are only 50% accurate, that's not going to be that helpful. We need the accuracy to move up more to like the 95% level before it's going to just be an effective thing to incorporate. Again, judgment-based inputs will continue to be important, but the time can be spent on the really value-added activities. Due diligence is the second most impactful potential area. So there are huge potential efficiency gains in both due diligence and the quality of earnings report, which is a part of diligence. So these are normally undertaken by third-party providers. Due diligence normally at the moment and for the past few decades has taken 3 weeks. This has the potential to go down to maybe 1 week instead. So AI can just synthesize a lot of the information that's in the data room into more of a format that the private equity firms will find useful. It also has the potential to change some of the processes and just add more dimensions into the due diligence process. So much earlier on in a potential investment process, private equity firms can start the due diligence if they use generative AI. So just with all the data that's now available on companies on the internet, they can, even like at a stage where they just get a teaser and start looking at a company, they can use generative AI to, for example, see things like employee engagement, team growth and retention, customer engagement, marketing and technology, and just get more of a sense of the company just from earlier on. Takeaways is that the cost both to pursue a killer deal is expected to come down by 10 to 30% within the next 3 to 5 years due to just generative AI efficiency gains. And one risk, however, with using Gen AI in this is just losing sight of how organized or not a company's data really is. So if it takes, takes 1,000 hours to synthesize a SIM into an investment committee memo for one company and 100 hours for another, all things being equal, the company that takes 100 hours is a lot better, but generative AI just risks obscuring that a little bit. And fourth area, so this is externally with portfolio companies. So there's a number of benefits from using Gen AI in portfolio companies, and there's potential to improve strategic and operational efficiency here, such as like improving profitability and identifying new revenue sources and reduce risk. So private equity firms have a lot of data on, for example, pricing studies and implementation of new ERP systems that can be used for this. Also identifying good target add-on acquisitions, and it can be used to much more effectively just monitor and benchmark portfolio companies and their operational and financial performance on a more regular basis. There's also a number of risks, and the main one here is just potential disruption to existing portcos. So this is considered material in certain industries such as educational software, advertising-enabled platforms, and private wealth, but it also risks having an impact on other companies. So it's important for private equity firms to really analyze whether customer needs may change for their portfolio companies, whether any of their business models are under threat, whether generative AI will enable new types of competitors in the space, and what competitive advantages the portfolio companies have currently that will help defend against these risks. And if needed, they may need to model revenue compression as well, which is not something that's normally done. So this is the third area, just looking a bit at the different models and costs. So that's a big consideration for private equity firms, whether they should build models in-house or use open source models such as Llama and just make those more specific for their edge cases. these have really different trade-offs in terms of cost, time to market, information security, and accuracy. However, the greatest cost is to curate the raw data so that the models can be trained on. So building a model in-house at the minute may cost 3 million, but the data side is much more complex, really. One private equity firm that's at the forefront of actually having an in-house model is EQT. So they have a model called Mother Brain, where they have all of their deals and their sims in. They use it so their professionals can log any interactions that they have, and they believe they can use this to get get to a deal much quicker and basically position themselves as the preferred buyer. So takeaways on the models and costs. Setting up an in-house model, it will likely take 8 months so that it's accurate and perform well enough for effective use. It's likely to be most effective for larger private equity firms, mainly just because of the cost. And larger private equity firms are likely to have some advantage in here as well, because they have so much data that they can put into the models, and they also have a large bench of junior professionals that can work on the data to get into the models. For smaller private equity firms, open source RAG models are likely more viable. However, this means that they will have to follow the pace that big tech takes, to innovate, and consultancy firms take to actually implement and curate the data in these models. Yeah, and then there's software that can be used for refining the data, but human subject matter expertise will still be required. So those are my takeaways from my research. Thank you. Any questions? Tim.
I worked in PE due diligence this summer, and aside from the fact that it's terrifying to think that it's going to shrink from 3 weeks to 1 week, I think one of the reasons why it takes this long is because you're talking to industry experts, and you're also running surveys at times. So you're kind of needing to spend this time to validate different data that you have, and things that AI can streamline. Do you think AI can credibly bring down the time it takes to do these time-intensive tasks, like talking to experts, like running surveys and things like that?
I think when it comes to conversations with subject matter experts, that will probably still need to be done by humans. I think synthesizing the information that comes from those presentations will probably be done by AI, but I think it will likely mean that the consultancy firms maybe get a bit more top heavy in that function, and they're able to actually spend more time on those really value added activities. And I think if you do that, you can probably take less time doing it, and that's just actually sitting and synthesizing the huge amount of data that's in the data room that takes an enormous amount of time will probably not be needed as much in the future. Any other questions?
Yeah. So on the piece about, I guess the mother brain making them a more preferred buyer, I guess that's through enhancing their ability to do deals faster, or maybe just find a higher bid price or something. So out of all the things that PE company can do to make themselves a more preferred buyer, where does AI rank on that? How influential is AI versus other things on their agenda for making them a better PE for a more preferred buyer?
I think AI has a huge potential to do that, partly, as you said, because it will actually they will be able to go from sim to giving a valuation a lot quicker, which really matters to private equity funds. But the human element in private equity is incredibly important, especially for smaller private equity funds, where perhaps they're buying a founder-owned business, and the founder may stay on board with the company, and there, the human element will always be like really, really important. So I think it will make them quicker, more efficient. They'll be able to get a lot more data than they currently can with like they don't have a lot of human capital to do a lot of these things. So it's more being more informed buyers and also some help with the portfolio companies. Another aspect of it is like their ability to incorporate AI in the portfolio companies that will then make the businesses more attractive for the next buyer, and that could also give a huge competitive advantage. But yeah, it depends. But I think the human aspect and the ability to make them more efficient is a lot bigger than just AI. Any other questions? No.